It's almost like instinct. You keep agreeing to things that are not in your favor. Every single time, all someone has to do is disagree with you and push back against you just a little. And there, it happens again. You concede. You never stand up for yourself. Even when you do, all the other person has to do is push you some more, and you find yourself conceding to what they want rather than what you want. You rarely defend yourself. If you do, you don't do it for long. Welcome to Heal and Thrive, where we work through issues of low self-esteem and trauma to come out on the other side stronger and free to reach life's potential. There's a story of a family who threw their little boy a birthday party and decided to invite the other kids in the neighborhood, who at the time were all gathered at a little local faith group that Sunday afternoon. They all went since all of them were invited. They all came into the large front yard and were hanging around a couple of tables set out for the party. With music blaring and the kids anticipating some nice food and drinks, a message came down. It was the birthday boy. He didn't like something he'd seen. It was one of the kids who came in the group. He looked different, and the message delivered was to tell this kid to leave. So what did this kid do? Did he stand up for himself? Remember, he's a kid and looks very different than every other kid at the party. He looks different than every other person in the whole neighborhood. So what was this kid's reaction? Well, we'll see in a moment. There are two extremes in the reactions that people have. They either stand up for themselves or they fold almost immediately. And so the question is, if you're the sort of person who folds, why do you do that? What's happening with you in these situations? Why haven't you learned to stand up for yourself? Why haven't you learned to take your side? The source of this default behavior is twofold: the fear of pain and death, and two, the fear of further ostracization. You may have had many experiences with aggression from people throughout your life. You've learned that people can be very threatening and dangerous. And so instinctively, you want to place yourself in the mind frame where all your interactions have to end up in their favor. You want to telegraph to them that you're not a threat. They don't need to be aggressive. And even more than being aggressive, they don't need to escalate things to violence. Because instinctively, you know that you would lose in a violent confrontation. They're either bigger and likely stronger than you, or the other people around will definitely side with them over you. You will therefore make sure that you lose in your interactions with them. The advantage in this for you is that you are in control of your own losses. It's a sort of tactical retreat in a battle. The only difference is, you didn't even fight for yourself. You conceded because you figured if you team up with the other person against yourself, you can at least keep the punishment under some control. At least that brings some of the situation under your control if you're also allowed to go against yourself on their behalf. It all boils down to a fear of pain and death. Growing up, you've sensed that hostility could mean bodily harm or ostracization or both. You've also experienced how quickly things can escalate. People have been unreasonably angry at you for things they shouldn't have gotten that angry about. You know that the threshold for escalation is very low when it comes to you. This is even worse if in some cases you didn't have to do anything to face whatever prejudice it was. Many women and girls will tell you that this has been their experience, but also some men and boys will relate. How do you start standing up for yourself then? Well, overcome the thing you're afraid of. That's death. It's your instinct's job to keep you from death or harm of any sort. And so how does one go against your instinct? Well, you really don't. Not if you want to maintain your change for the long term. What you do is to come to a new realization. When you know that you actually live in a different reality than you thought, your instincts will change accordingly to optimize for your well-being within that newly discovered reality. To overcome the fear of death, recognize that it's part of life. So is pain. No mere human being has avoided death. Even the great teaching of the Christian faith talks about a resurrection. But before there is a resurrection, there's death. Pain too is a part of life. It's your mind indicating to you that there might be something wrong, and so pay attention and make the necessary adjustments if that's the case. But like strength training, the pain of lifting weights till your muscle fibers are destroyed and replaced by bigger ones, pain shouldn't always mean what you're doing isn't good for you. With death, by realizing it comes for everyone sometimes by weird accidents, and that you're not in as much control as you stress over having, you free yourself to live. And plus, it happens to you once. It just happens one day out of the 30,000 or more days people tend to live for. The 30,000 or more days are all gifts that you don't need to spoil by stressing constantly. Why worry? If you think about pain and death this way, life becomes like a playground. It's a video game, and you get to do so many cool things. You get to disagree with people, because what can they do in the grand scheme of things? Are they going to make your life stressful? Well, who says you have to stay around them after the disagreement? You start living only when you stop fearing death, because fearing it doesn't save you from it. Cherish the time that you do have. And throwing back to another piece of wisdom from the Christian and Jewish faiths, its text has a prayer that asks the Creator, "Teach me to number my days that I may apply my heart to wisdom." And it's true. In one sense, we have a lot of time. In another sense, we don't. And so it's good to appreciate the time we do have by truly living. Stop being just a tool people use. Number 2 is get rid of the delusion that people are scarce, that friends are scarce. You can make new friends. It's easy to fall into the mindset that if you don't maintain these friendships, that you may not form new ones, or that these particular friends are so important to keep for some other unarticulated reasons. If you're going to keep people as friends, it shouldn't be people who are always using you, who never pour into your life, who disproportionately take from you by intimidation or guilt. Now, should you not sacrifice for others then? Absolutely you should, and it is a noble thing to do. But it should be out of love for them and wanting the best for them, not because you fear them or how they'll react if you don't give up your own interests and give in to theirs. You have to realize that there are people who've grown up selfish. They only look out for their interests. That's how they've grown up. They've been given no incentive by society to look out for others. And so when dealing with them, you need to stand up to them. In fact, to be friends with people like this, you need to be a person with a backbone. Whether they're friendly or try to be intimidating about it, stand up for your interests. Now back to the story. What did the little boy do when he was told to leave? He simply said no. Yes, it was someone else's house and someone else's party, but he wasn't saying no to leaving someone else's house. He was saying no to being treated differently than everyone else because he looked different. He knew that for that society, treating him that way was what everyone did. It was acceptable. And so it was really out of character to see himself do something like that. Fortunately, there was one adult among the kids. He was the youth mentor from that faith group. He asked the rest of the kids to leave with this kid. A very nice attempt at solidarity. Now, since this is a true story and not a movie, I would like to say that everyone, at least around the table where this kid was, stood up and left with him, but they didn't. Some of the kids sort of stood up. 1 or 2 of them made it to the gate a couple steps away from the table, but none stayed outside with this kid. On the surface, it would look like a sob story. The kid was kicked out. No one left the party with him in solidarity. And he would go on to experience a variety of events like this for many years to come. But the story is more than that. In this same story, at least on that day, he stood up for himself. Not after long contemplating the consequences of saying no, but out of a bravery that came forward in the moment. He won't always be brave or say the right thing. In fact, he will go on to fail to stand up for himself many, many times to come. But at least on this day, he stood up, when the easier thing to do was to take his sob story with him into a society that would treat him not that differently than what happened at the party. He could have continued to live in his self-righteous, martyred state where he's the wrong one of society, but never does anything about it. Instead, his story is that on that day, he showed himself that he can stand up for himself. He overcame the fear of death, at least for a moment. He had a backbone, even if that meant being even more ostracized than he already was. And that was better, because there are some things that are worse to have than having nothing. So stop fearing death so you can finally start living. Stop caring about losing bad friendships in order to gain good ones. You don't have to be a passive victim who's constantly taken advantage of. Your identity doesn't have to remain the one who's always wronged by other people. Stand up for the things you believe in and love, including yourself. Hopefully, one day you can stand up for those who don't know how to stand up for themselves just yet. If you found this content useful, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this.